There, close to the front of the drawer, were her rings. I looked at the smoke detector, where I knew a camera had been installed, then pulled my ring off and dropped it in the drawer with hers. I looked back at the camera and extended a middle finger. Eat that bitch, I thought to myself. I got up the next morning and got ready for work. Before I left, I checked Marcy's email. Sure enough, there was a new message with the subject, "Been made." I opened it up and smiled as I read the note. I don't know how, but your husband found the surveillance equipment. Attached are the videos we got last night. He also spotted our investigator. Awaiting instructions, the short message said. I made sure it was marked unread, then closed out the mail client. I left for work and somehow managed to get through the day. When I got home, I checked my email and found the attachments Ernesto sent from the previous night's surveillance. I wasn't really impressed by what I saw. Marcy was right, though. Trey was considerably smaller than me, but he seemed to make up for it with enthusiasm. I listened to their after talk. What do you think your husband's doing right now? Trey asked. He's probably banging that little 304 from next door. I'll have video of it tomorrow morning, then I'll send it on to my attorney. Enough about him. Let's screw some more. You got it, babe, Trey said. I ended the video, closed the office door, then grabbed my phone and called Ernesto. Senor Rick, he said when he answered. Muchas gracias for the walking around money. It really helped. Did you see what I sent this morning? I did, Ernesto, thanks. Listen, I have an idea for a plan and I want to run it by you. See what you think. Sure. He listened quietly as I told him what I had in mind. Well, is that something you can help set up? I asked when I laid it out for him. I believe so, Senor Rick, he said. It would take a bit more walking around money, though. When would you want to do this? In 10 days, I said. 10 days? It can be done, he told me. Let me ask a couple people, and I'll get back to you. Just one thing. What's that? Why in 10 days? Why not sooner? He asked. That'll be our 25th wedding anniversary. I want to make sure she never forgets it. You are one mean hombre. You know that, Senor Rick? He asked, laughing. I do my best, Ernesto. Get back to me as soon as you can. Let me know what you need, and please try to keep it reasonable. I will, Senor Rick. Talk to you soon. We ended the call and I went back through my contact list. There was one more person I needed to reach out to, but I didn't know if she would even be available or willing to help. I found her number, the one she gave me for her personal cell when we were in Iraq together. I took a deep breath and dialed. To my amazement, she picked up on the second ring. Deidre, she said when she answered. Deidre, this is Rick Weston. Rick, oh my God, it's been forever, she exclaimed. How are you doing? Could be better, I told her. Listen, you got a few minutes? Of course, I was just getting ready to sit down for dinner. I can call back if I'm interrupting something. No, you're not interrupting anything. These days, it's just me and the cat. I'm sorry to hear that. It's all good, she said. So, what's up with you? She listened quietly as I told her a bit more than the Reader's Digest version of my story. Oh my God, when I finished. And you have proof of all this? Yes, emails, pictures, videos, you name it. She also told me you talked to her, said something about us taking good care of each other. In fact, let me read you what she wrote. I'd like to hear that, she said. I pulled out Marcy's letter and read from it. The bitch came to visit me, and with a smug look, she told me that she took care of you over there, and then walked off before I could ask what she meant. But when you came back, I knew precisely what she meant, I read. That lying bitch, Deidre said. I specifically told her that we were a team, that we looked out for each other, that we had each other's six. She popped off with something like, I'll just bet you did, then slammed the door in my face. Look, I shouldn't have done what I did with you, and I'm sorry if I compromised you in any way. That's on me, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. That's the only time I ever fooled around on her. But none of that excuses this in my opinion, I said. Rick, you have nothing to apologize for. We were both pretty rattled after that ambush, and frankly, I'm not sorry. It's not like we plotted and schemed behind her back. Granted, it was a bit unprofessional and it would have cost us both if we had been caught, but I don't regret having done it one bit. So, what are you gonna do? I told her my plan and waited for a response. She responded after a few moments. I like it. I really like it. I have a man in Colombia who's handling the one part, I said, but I don't have the necessary access for the other. I think I may be able to help you out there, she said. When do you want this done? 10 days. That'll be our 25th anniversary. Oh, you're so evil, she said with a laugh. All right, consider it done. It'll be my anniversary present to you. I couldn't help but laugh at that. She spoke again after a few moments. You know, I've thought a lot about you since Iraq. I've thought a lot about you too. We were a great team over there, weren't we? Yes, we were, I answered. You know, I haven't connected with anyone like that since then, she said sadly. I'm sorry to hear that. That's life, I guess. Yeah, I guess so, I told her. What are your plans? I've been thinking a lot about retiring lately. I'm too old to be in the field, so they have me shining a seat with my but pushing papers. Well, if you do retire, I know a company that would hire you in a heartbeat. Would I get to work with a certain retired Army colonel? She asked. I can guarantee that. Well, I guess there is something worth living for then. Rick, do you think that maybe we could reconnect? I asked, finishing her sentence. I could remember a time when Marcy and I did that, but that was many years ago. Something like that, she said. Unless, of course, you plan to take Marcy back. You're not going to, are you? Not after this. No, Marcy made her bed. Now she gets to lie in it. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let her ride off into the sunset with her doctor friend. Good, because I'd really like to finish what we started in Iraq. I would like that as well, I said. But I have a couple things to do first. I understand. Just do me a favor. What's that? I asked. Don't make me wait too long. Please. I won't, I told her. Just so you know, if this works, it'll take some time for my divorce to go through. I understand, Rick. Just know that I'm here for you. If you need someone to talk to, call me. Okay. I will, I said. It's great hearing your voice again, Rick. It's great hearing yours as well, I responded. Well, I'd better get going. My pasta salad is getting soggy. I'm getting a bit hungry as well, I said. I'll be in touch, Deidre, promise. You'd better, she replied. Talk to you soon. We ended the call, and I felt better than I had in a long time. I suppose Marcy was right. Deidre was smitten with me. And to be honest, right now I felt closer to her than I had with Marcy in a very long time. I closed my eyes and recalled our memories of Iraq. I was brought back to reality by the sound of knocking. Damn it, I said to myself as I went into the front room. I realized the knocking was at the back door. So I went and opened it to find Leslie with a plate covered with aluminum foil. I thought you might be a bit hungry, so I put together a plate for you, she said. I hope you like lasagna. Mind if I bring it in? Not at all. I love lasagna. Just put it on the counter if you would please. She smiled as she put the plate on the counter. I hope you like it, she said. Unless, of course, you see something else you'd like to taste. I have to admit, I was tempted and thought about her offer. But after what I had learned and after my conversation with Deidre, I decided not to. Besides, I felt like there was a real chance with Deidre, and I wasn't about to risk that for a quick pleasure with Leslie. As tempting as that offer sounds, I'm afraid I'm going to have to take a rain check, I said. Her face changed suddenly, and she stood up straight. What's the matter? She asked. Don't you find me attractive? Marcy gave you a hall pass, after all. I find you very attractive, and I'm sure she'd agree. In fact, she's got a camera right up there, I added, pointing to the smoke detector. And I'm sure she thinks you're attractive as well. Why don't you give her a wave and tell her hello? Shocked, she turned around and looked at the smoke detector. What? She asked. Are you sure about that? Oh yes, she had cameras put into almost every room of the house. And she's got a PI following me. Maybe you as well. Didn't you know? She shook her head. No, I didn't. Step into my office for a bit, Leslie, I said. I have something to show you. She followed me into my home office, where I handed her a printout of the email chain between Marcy and Trey. Her eyes widened as she read it. She handed the printout back when she finished. Oh my God, that bitch. I had no idea. Rick, honest, I didn't. I know. She used you and played you for a fool right along with me. What are you going to do? She asked. I've got something in the works, and yes, I'll be filing for divorce. And I won't be doing anything with anyone until that divorce is final. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, I understand, Rick, she asked quietly. Can we still be friends? I don't see why not, I said. But we can't take it beyond that. Okay, Rick, I'm sorry about everything. I hope you enjoy the lasagna. I'm sure I will, Leslie. Thank you. I escorted her to the back door and watched as she left. I had to admit, she looked good in those shorts, but there was no way I was going to risk everything. After she left the yard, I went upstairs and changed into my running gear. I figured the lasagna, which was still quite warm, would be good when I got back. After my run, I took a shower and changed, then went down and gobbled up the lasagna Leslie left earlier. It was chock full of cheese, mushrooms, and meat, just the way I like it, and it hit the spot. I washed the plate, grabbed a beer, and went into my home office, pausing only long enough to flip a bird at the camera in the front room. The first thing I did was check Marcy's email. I saw she had responded to the investigator, telling him to back off a bit for now. There were no other emails, either to or from her. I then took a look at her finances. We maintained 3 checking accounts, one for each of us and a household account for bills. Most of what we made went into the household account, but we each kept 10% for ourselves. We started doing that shortly after we got married. We also agreed to put each other on our personal signature cards in the event of an emergency. So I had no problem getting into her account. I noticed that she had saved up quite a bit over the years, but I also noticed she had paid a hefty retainer to Allison Hargraves, attorney at law, and had paid a considerable amount to Smith Investigations. I also noticed a few charges to Victoria's Secret, no doubt for her lover, since I had never seen her wear anything from them. From there, I did a bit of research on Allison Hargraves. The name was a bit familiar to me, but I couldn't recall from where. A quick Google search revealed that in addition to being a family law attorney, she's an author. A few years back, she sparked a bit of controversy with a book she wrote promoting the idea of a female-led marriage. I never read the book, but decided to give it a look. I also found that she had been interviewed by the New York Times as a result of her book. In the interview, she admitted that while she consults with anyone who calls on her, she only takes on women as clients and generally tries to recruit them into what she called the hot wife and cuck lifestyle. I decided to look into that a bit before scheduling an appointment. From there, I went to Amazon and ordered the cheapest Kindle version of her book. I downloaded it to my Kindle and went to the back patio with a beer and a cigar. After sorting through the psychobabble and the bullshit, it was quite clear to me that Hargraves was a man-hating bitch who delighted seeing men put in marital conditions that sounded to me like torture and mental cruelty. This is who Marcy chose as an attorney, I thought. It clearly spoke volumes to me. I got a break from Hargraves' bullshit when my phone buzzed. I looked and saw a text from Ernesto, telling me he could set up what I wanted, but it would cost $1,000. He provided a bank account number I could wire the funds to and said he could make all the arrangements while ensuring nothing could be traced back to me. I had a better idea, however. I went into the office, pulled up Marcy's account, and made the transfer to the bank Ernesto specified. She still had plenty of money left, and I doubted she would even bother to look. This way, I thought, if anything was ever traced, it would show the money came from her. I replied to Ernesto, telling him it was done. I finished my cigar, then went inside to catch a bit of television and unwind before going to bed. The next few days flew by fairly quickly. I followed the same routine, got up, checked the recap from Ernesto, checked Marcy's email, then went to work. Come home, take a run, shower, eat, check emails, drink a beer, smoke a cigar, then watch some television before going to bed. Lather, rinse, repeat. I no longer had any desire to speak to Marcy, so I didn't care that she never called or sent a text. I found that I rather enjoyed not seeing or hearing from her since whatever love I once had for her was now basically gone. I only saw Leslie one time after I showed her the email chain I printed out. That was the next day, when I returned the plate. Vince invited me to stay for dinner, but I begged off, saying I had things to get done. He seemed disappointed, but I'm sure he would get over it. Personally, I was glad Leslie stayed away as well. That was one distraction I really didn't need. The only thing that kept me going were the periodic phone calls with Deidre. I had gotten into the habit of calling her every couple days just to say hello. We talked about a lot of things, our lives, our hopes and dreams, even about pets. We even talked about my kids. The more I talked with her, the closer I felt to her. Eventually, I found myself thinking about her when I went to bed and realized I was falling for her. I managed to arrange an appointment to see Allison Hargraves. When I got to her office, her receptionist ushered me in and offered a cup of coffee. Being a military man, I eagerly accepted. I shook Allison's hand and introduced myself. She seemed to be about my age, well-dressed and not in bad shape. I noticed the ring on her finger and wondered what kind of a life her husband led. "So, I understand you're looking into getting a divorce," she said. "Yes, I am." "Your name is Weston, is that right?" she asked. "Yes, it is," I told her. She frowned as she looked at something on her computer, then looked back at me. "What's your wife's name, if I may ask?" she queried. "Marcy. That's short for Marcia." "Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Weston, but I'm afraid I can't represent you," she said. "It would present a conflict of interest. You see, I'm already representing your wife." "Yes, I know. And I also know you only represent women. Sounds a bit sexist, if you ask me." She looked at me hard. "If you already know that, why did you ask to see me?" she asked. "As you may already know, I'm a retired Army intelligence officer, and I like to know as much as I can about my enemy." "Enemy?" she asked. "Is that how you see me?" "Pretty much the way I see both you and Marcy, actually. I read your book. I also read the interview you did for the New York Times. I know you like to recruit your clients into your lifestyle. Is that what you did to my wife? Recruit her?" "Mr. Weston, that's privileged information," she said. "Of course, did you know Marcy was going to Colombia for 6 weeks? And did you know what she planned to do during those 6 weeks?" "Again, Mr. Weston, that's privileged information, and I'm not at liberty to disclose that," she said. I nodded my head. "I see you're married," I told her. She briefly looked at her rings. "I found your chapter on controlling husbands quite interesting. Tell me, do you treat your husband the way you suggest in that chapter? Do you humiliate him, control his every movement?" "That is none of your concern, Mr. Weston, and I think this interview is over. Please, you know the way out," she said. I smiled as I nodded my head. "I'd like to say it's been a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Hargraves," as I stood up, but that would be a lie. "I'm sure we'll see each other again. Good day." I went toward the door and stopped long enough to face her one last time. "By the way, I personally found your book to be quite disgusting. Have a good day." I walked out of her office before she had a chance to respond. The receptionist looked at me with a smile as I left. I wondered if she heard what transpired. Finally, the day of our 25th anniversary came. I had plenty of comp time on the books, so I took the day off. I knew it would be a busy day, and I wanted to be home to keep up with the developments. I had gotten a text from Deidre early that morning telling me she was able to do what I asked. I nervously awaited word from Ernesto. About mid-morning, I got a text from him. "Check your email." After booting up my computer, I pulled up my email client and saw that he had sent a video, so I opened it up. It looked as if the video had been taken at a point overlooking a dirt road where a hastily constructed checkpoint had been set up. I could see 3 SUVs coming down the road toward the checkpoint. As the vehicles approached, armed military men stopped them. They barked orders to the 2 people in the SUV before opening the doors. As I watched, the soldiers began opening boxes and rummaging through what was inside. The next thing I knew, one of them hollered out and several more armed soldiers came running. They looked in the boxes, then started carrying them to a military vehicle parked nearby. One of the soldiers pointed his rifle at the driver's side door and barked an order. The door opened and I saw Trey stepping out, his hands in the air. Marcy came around from the passenger side, walking between 2 armed soldiers. The 2 of them were roughly handcuffed, then placed in the back of a military vehicle. A tow truck came, and the SUV they were in was connected up and hauled away. The soldiers inspected the other 2 vehicles before finally waving them on. To say I was shocked was an understatement. I pulled up my phone and called Ernesto. "Hola," Ernesto said when he answered. "I take it you've seen the video?" "I have, Ernesto. What the hell happened?" "Well, we got the stuff, just as you asked. Only a couple grams, just enough to get her deported. Unfortunately, my men weren't able to plant it on her. Turns out her lover, Dr. Trey, has been smuggling fairly large quantities of cocaine and heroin for a while. There was already several kilos in the vehicle and boxes marked for medicine. My men saw the stuff being packed and loaded, so they backed off. They didn't want to get mixed up with any cartel business, and I don't blame them. Neither do I. So, where is Marcy and Trey now? Was she involved with this? They're both being held in jail, Ernesto said. It looks like she may have known about it, but I'm not sure to what extent. They have 48 hours to turn this over to a judge, and it could take up to 90 days for them to investigate and decide whether or not to prosecute. From what we saw, though, I don't think it'll take them that long. So what happens to them? Do you know if the consulate has been made aware of this? I'm sure the consulate in Bogota is aware of it by now, Ernesto said. This happened fairly early this morning. Keep an eye on things for me, Ernesto, I said. I will, boss. I'm sorry this happened. I know it's not quite what you were expecting. Don't be sorry. It's not quite what I had in mind. But if she's involved in trafficking drugs with Trey, she deserves whatever she gets. We ended the call, and I immediately called Deidre to let her know what happened. She didn't sound all that surprised. Do you have a line on what's going on down there? I asked. That's not my particular area of concern. But I know the station chief down there, and I can make a call to see what I can find out. Please do, I said. I'll call you as soon as I hear something. While I waited to hear back from her, I gathered a trash bag and went through the house, removing all the cameras and microphones Marcy's PI installed. I also went into the attic and grabbed the receiver and laptop. I shoved it all in the bag, not caring if anything got broke, then set it in the driveway in front of the garage. I called Smith Investigations. Smith Investigations, a female voice said. I'd like to speak with the head shithead there, please, I said. Okay, sir. One moment, please, she stammered. A few seconds later, I heard the man I had encountered earlier at Yancey's. James Smith, what can I do for you? He asked. This is Rick Weston. You remember me. We met in the parking lot at Yancey's the other day. Your client is sitting in a Colombian jail on charges of drug trafficking. I've pulled all of your shit out of my house. It's in a garbage bag in my driveway. If it's still there tomorrow morning, I'm tossing it out with the rest of the garbage. Got it? Yes, sir, he said. I ended the call not caring what he had to say. The stuff was gone the next morning when I went to work. I assumed Smith picked it up, but I really didn't care if someone had come along and stolen it. A few moments after I got off the phone with Smith, my phone rang. It was Deidre. I just got off the phone with the station chief in Bogota, she said. What did you learn? The feds in Colombia have been watching Trey ever since he got to Bogota. It turns out he's a distant relative of the guy who runs one of the most vicious drug cartels down there. If Marcy is involved with him, then she's looking at a long stretch in prison down there. The judge assigned to the case is known for being especially hard on foreigners involved in drug trafficking. How much time is she looking at? I asked. At least 10 years. Well, I'd say if she couldn't do the time, she shouldn't have done the crime. How much were they carrying? According to my source, at least 20 pounds of cocaine and heroin, she said. Damn. You can expect a visit from the State Department pretty soon, Deidre said. Let me know how it goes. I figured as much. I'll call you when I hear something. So what are you going to do now? She asked. Get a divorce? No way am I staying married to a cheating, lying drug smuggler. Good, she replied. After we ended the call, I dialed the hotel in Bogota where they were staying. Pablo answered the phone. Good morning, Pablo, I said. This is Rick Weston. Can you please put me through to Penny Washington's room, please? Si, Senor Weston. I will be happy to do that for you. Penny picked up the phone after the first ring. Hello, she said nervously. Penny, this is Rick Weston. I've been trying to get in touch with my wife. I lied. Today's our anniversary, and I wanted to say hello. Any idea where she is? Is she out celebrating with Trey or something? No, Rick. She's not out celebrating, Penny said. She sounded like she was about to start crying. What's the matter, Penny? Oh, Rick, it was horrible. We were heading out to a village and we got stopped at a checkpoint. Marcy and Trey were arrested. The soldiers said they were transporting drugs. They questioned us at gunpoint. I thought they were going to kill us. They took Marcy and Trey away and escorted us back to the hotel. They kept asking us if we also had drugs, but we didn't know what they were talking about. They finally told us to stay at the hotel and not go anywhere. We're all pretty much on house arrest here. I see, I told her. Sounds like you had a bit of excitement. So, what's going to happen now? I don't know. The Doctors Without Borders people told us to stay put for now. They said we may have to stay here for as long as 3 months. I'm sure they just want to do a thorough investigation, Penny, I said. Have you told Josh yet? No, I haven't. Have you talked to him since the last time we spoke? No, Penny. I've had enough on my plate since you guys left for your little South American fun adventure, but I do plan on speaking with him soon. Please, Rick, you can't tell him what's been going on, she pleaded. It'll destroy him. Not as much as your cheating will destroy him, I said. Don't you think your husband deserves to know what kind of a woman he's married to? I'm begging you. Please don't, she begged. Have a good day, Penny, I said before ending the call. What she didn't know was that I already had video of her with her doctor lover. I looked through my contacts and found Josh's cell number. I decided to give him a call. Josh, he said when he answered. Josh, this is Rick Weston. You got a couple minutes? Yeah, sure, Rick. What's going on? I gave him the abridged version of what had been going on in Colombia, including the drug arrest, and offered to email him video of Penny's activities. Yeah, email it to me, he said. I had a feeling something was going on. Penny just didn't seem to be herself the last few times I talked to her. I'm sorry, Josh, I said. I just didn't feel it was right to keep it from you. And I've had an awful lot to deal with myself. No problem, Rick. I understand. I'm sure it hasn't been easy for you. So, what are you gonna do? I asked. I can't see getting past this, he said. It's not the first time she's cheated on me. But by God, it's going to be the last. Thanks for letting me know. We ended the call and I emailed several videos that had been captured in Penny's room. My next call was to a divorce lawyer. I got an appointment to see her in 3 days. A couple days later, I was called up to see my immediate supervisor, Bill Hastings. When I got to his office, I noticed a tall man in a dark suit. He stood as I walked in. Rick, this is Thomas Herman, Bill said. He's with the State Department. Tom held out his hand and I shook it. Tom, this is Rick Weston. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Weston. Pleasure is all mine, I said. And call me Rick, please. What can I do for the State Department? Well, Rick, your wife, Marcia, has been taken into custody by federal authorities in Colombia. She's been charged with drug trafficking. Drug trafficking? I asked. Are you sure about that? She's supposed to be down there with a group from Doctors Without Borders. I find it hard to believe she'd be involved with drug trafficking. Of course, I lied. I felt it better to put on a good face and play the part of the grieved husband. Is there anything you can do to help her out? I mean, she is a U.S. citizen. I'm afraid not, Rick. You see, Americans in Colombia are subject to the laws there. If they break the law, they're subject to arrest by local authorities. We can't just go in and get them out of prison. We can keep an eye on her, arrange for visits, do welfare checks, that sort of thing. But we're not allowed to interfere with the judicial actions down there. I see, I said. And there's another problem. What's that? I asked. Even if she were set free today, she wouldn't be able to fly home, he said. It seems she's already been placed on a no-fly list. Really? I asked. Yes, it could be just an administrative error. It happens sometimes, but it takes quite a bit to get someone off that list. So, what is she facing? I asked. Well, the drug laws in Colombia are some of the toughest in the Western Hemisphere. If all she had were a few grams for personal use, chances are they would have handled it as an administrative matter and simply given her a fine and deported her. But she was found with a considerable amount of drugs, and they believe that was just the tip of the iceberg. She could be facing up to 12 years in prison. 12 years? I asked. Yes, he replied. After about 7 or 8 years, the judge can put her on what's known as conditional liberty, but she won't be allowed to leave the country, and she won't be able to get a legal paying job in Colombia since she's a foreigner. So chances are, she'll be stuck in prison for the duration. Of course, there are things that be done to help, but with her being on the no-fly list, she's pretty much stuck there. She will need some money for expenses, legal fees, and so on, he added, pulling a pamphlet out of his briefcase. This pamphlet will help explain how to do that. Make sure you follow the directions. If you don't, it could delay her getting the funds. If you wish, I can help arrange for visitation. Is that something you'd be interested in? Yeah, I have a few things to do first. Can I call you in a couple days? Of course, he said, pulling a business card out of his pocket. That's my direct line. Just call anytime during normal business hours. I took the card and slipped it in my pocket. Just one thing, Tom. What about the rest of her team? Are they also being held? One other person was taken into custody, Tom said. The others have been asked to remain in Bogota for a while. I'm really not at liberty to say any more than that. Okay, thanks for all your help. I'll be in touch. We shook hands and he left the office. Bill motioned for me to remain behind. Once we were certain Tom was out of the area, Bill closed his door and turned to me. This isn't good, Rick, he told me. It could impact your security clearance and possibly even your job. You need to get a handle on this, ASAP. I understand, Bill, I said. I gave him an abbreviated version of what I already knew. I didn't tell him what I had planned with Ernesto and Deidre, however. He listened, shocked at what he heard. I have an appointment to see a lawyer tomorrow. I intend to personally deliver the divorce papers to her in Colombia. All right, listen, you have plenty of comp time coming to you. Take a couple weeks. Do what you gotta do and get this shit under control. I will, Bill, I said. Thanks. I went home and started going back through Marcy's email, this time looking for specific terms or phrases. I got several hits and looked at the emails. Most of them seemed innocuous, but I found one exchange that looked promising. You interested in making a lot of money on our trip to Colombia? Trey asked in an email he sent about 3 months before their trip. Sure, Marcy replied. What do you have in mind? Not here, he answered. Let's meet in private after work and I'll explain. Nothing more was mentioned for a week. Then Trey sent another email. Well, have you decided yet? Are you sure this will work? She asked. Of course, he said. I've done it before. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. All right, she answered. I'll do it. Good girl, trust me. You'll be glad you did. I printed out the email chain and exported it to PDF and saved it to a thumb drive with other emails. I turned to the videos, this time, listening for anything that might suggest a plan to haul drugs. I fast-forwarded through the intimate scenes and caught a conversation between them the day before they were captured. I took note of the date and timestamp on the video. Are you ready? Trey asked. Tomorrow's the big day. I think so, she responded nervously. Good. The product will be placed on our vehicle tomorrow morning. We don't even have to touch it or see it. It'll be in boxes marked for medicine. And you're sure we won't get caught? Marcy asked. I've been on that road plenty of times, he told her. There's never been a checkpoint out there before. If this works, we'll be doing it more often. If all goes well, by the time we leave, we'll have enough money to retire. Sounds good to me, she said. Bingo, I thought to myself. I made a note of the video and saved it to my thumb drive. After collecting my thoughts, I sent an email to the kids, asking them to join me in a Skype call tomorrow evening. Then I called Ernesto and told him what I found. Damn, what are you gonna do? I'm going to go through the rest of the videos and her email to see what else I can find, I said. I'm seeing a lawyer tomorrow about a divorce and I intend to hand-deliver the papers to her myself. You're coming here then? He asked. That's my plan. While I'm there, I also intend to hand-deliver this evidence to the prosecutor. You can stay with me and my family if you want, Ernesto said. I appreciate that, Ernesto. I look forward to tasting Lupe's cooking. He laughed. Trust me, you haven't eaten till you've had some of her cooking, he said. Call me when you're ready to come down, and I'll pick you up at the airport. Will do, my friend. Talk to you soon. I looked at my watch and realized I needed to send Marcy's money out. I read the pamphlet Tom gave me. According to that, the State Department's Office of Overseas Citizen Services would set up a trust fund for her, which would cost $30. Tom wrote a note at the bottom of the page, telling me the trust fund had already been established and the initial $30 fee would be subtracted from the money I sent. The OCS, in turn, would transfer the money to the embassy, who would transfer the money to the prison authorities in Colombia. The whole process could take up to 3 or 4 weeks, according to the pamphlet. I decided to use Western Union, since that was supposedly the fastest way to get the funds to her. I already had all of Marcy's account details, so I checked her account, logged into the Western Union site, and sent all but $5. Once I verified the money was gone, I grabbed a pile of trash bags and tossed all of her things, including our wedding album, into them, not really caring if anything got messed up or not. The filled bags were then crammed into her car. I called her parents and explained the situation. They were heartbroken to hear of my plans to divorce her and tried talking me out of it. I refused to relent and told them this had been a long time coming. They were also upset to hear she was in a Colombian jail on charges of drug trafficking. "Are you sure Marcy was involved in drugs?" her father asked. "I'm certain of it," I told him. "I've even got evidence I'll be giving to the prosecutor. I just need her stuff out of here." "All right, Rick, we'll be over to get her stuff. I'm sorry it came to this. We had no idea things were this bad." We said our goodbyes and ended the call. A half hour later, they arrived and took her car, along with the rest of her things. They were quite sad to learn what Marcy had done, but they understood my reason for divorcing her. "Please stay in touch with us, Rick," her mother said as she hugged me. "I will, Mom," I said. Her father and I shook hands, both realizing it was probably the last time we would see each other. I was exhausted by the time they left, both physically and emotionally. I grabbed a beer and a cigar and sat out on the back porch. I hadn't been there very long before my phone rang. It was Deidre, checking in to make sure I was all right. "Hey," when I answered the phone. "Hey yourself," she said. "How are you doing?" "I've been better," I told her. "Right now, I'm enjoying a beer and a cigar." "I wouldn't mind one of those myself," she said. "What, a beer or a cigar?" I asked, both actually prompting me to laugh. "You smoke cigars?" I asked. "I've been known to from time to time." "So, how did your day go?" I filled her in on what had taken place and told her I had an appointment to see a lawyer tomorrow. "Sounds like you've had one hell of a day," she said. "Yeah, it's been a day all right," I told her. "But hearing your voice is making me feel better already." "Good. By the way, I have an idea," I told her. "What, another one?" she asked sarcastically. I laughed, then told her what I had in mind. There were a few moments of silence when I finished, and I almost asked if she was still there. Finally, she responded. "You know, I think that's the best idea I've heard in a long time," she said. "Let's do it. You're on. I'll fill you in on the details when I get back from Colombia." "I'm looking forward to that," she said. We talked a bit longer before ending the call. I felt much better after our discussion. The next day, I went to see my attorney. I double-checked to make sure I had everything, then headed out. When I got to her office, I was ushered in by her receptionist and offered a cup of coffee, which I graciously accepted. Lisa Hawkins was nothing like Allison Hargraves. She exuded confidence, and what's more, she was open and friendly. She listened to my story, taking notes as I spoke, then looked at the evidence, which included Marcy's letter and the emails I printed out. I also told her about the charges Marcy faced in Colombia. "Well, that should make things a bit easier for us," she said. "How much time is she facing down there?" "I'm told up to 12 years. 12 years in a Colombian prison," Lisa said. "She's not going to have an easy time of it down there. So, what are you looking to get out of this?" "Everything. She can keep her 401k, her clothes and her car," I said. "I've already sent most of her money down there already for her expenses. The rest I want to keep." "I think that's doable. Fortunately, you can file on grounds of adultery and cruelty in this state, and I think you've shown good cause for those. Also, judges take things like that into consideration when it comes time for splitting assets. Just curious, how do you plan to have her served? If we use the system, it could take weeks before she gets the papers." "I intend to carry the papers to her myself," I said. "I hope to convince her that it would be in her best interest to sign them and be done with it." "Okay," she replied. "I can have these written up and filed in, say, 2 days. Would that work for you?" "Yes," I told her. "Also, what about going after Trey, her attorney in the hospital?" "You mean Allison Hargraves?" she asked. "Yes, I got the impression Mrs. Hargraves convinced her to turn me into some kind of cuck slave. I tried to find out myself, but she refused to give me an answer. You actually spoke to Allison Hargraves yourself? Lisa asked. Yes, I did. You're an awfully brave man, she said. Well, she is protected by attorney-client privilege, so she's right to not tell you what transpired between them. Also, while you can file for alienation of affection in this state, the reality is that those suits almost never go anywhere. My best advice would be to let it go and not waste your money on them. I accepted her suggestion, and we wrapped the meeting up with her promise to inform me when the papers were filed and ready to be served. 2 days tops, she said. I thanked her, paid a hefty retainer, and left. Later that day, I spoke to the kids on Skype. It was great to see them, and I wished I had better news for them. Hey, Dad. What's up? Kyle asked. Hi, Dad, Rhonda added. What's going on? Kids, I have some news for you, and I wanted to tell both of you at the same time. Is something wrong, Dad? Rhonda asked. Yes, your mother and I are getting divorced. Both of them gasped in shock when I said that. Why, Dad? Kyle asked. Yeah, Rhonda added. Did you do something? I told them the abbreviated version of the story and finished by informing them their mother was sitting in a Colombian jail on drug trafficking charges. Are you sure she was really involved with that, Dad? Rhonda asked. Yes, Rhonda, I'm afraid it's true. I even have evidence that I'll be presenting to the prosecutor when I go down there. You mean, you're going to help the prosecutor? You're going to help them put her in prison? Kyle asked. She broke the law down there, son. I don't like it, but it is what it is. We've talked about drugs before. You know what cocaine and heroin can do. There's no way I can just turn a blind eye to that, and you know it. I know, Kyle said quietly. It's just so screwed up? I asked. He nodded his head. I know, son. It is screwed up and I'm sorry. But your mom made the decision to do it, and she got caught. We talked a bit longer, and I answered all their questions. It was a tough conversation, but by the time we were finished, they knew everything their mother had done and seemed to understand why I had to do what I was doing. I promised to email them an address so they could send her letters, and we ended with a tearful farewell. After we finished, I called Tom and asked him to arrange for visitation the day after I got the papers. He promised to set it up, and we ended that call. Then I called Ernesto and told him of my plans. By the way, do you know who's prosecuting the case? I asked. That would be Ricardo Montoya, Ernesto replied. He's tough, believe me. Good. When I get there, I have evidence I need to give him. Okay, Ernesto said before we ended the call. My last call was to Deidre. She listened quietly as I brought her up to speed on what had happened. We spoke for quite some time, and I felt better after we ended the call. 2 days later, Lisa contacted me to say the papers had been filed with the court, and a copy was prepared for Marcy's signature. I already had my bags packed and the tickets ready to be picked up, so I grabbed my passport and a few final things, then headed out. After getting the papers from her, I called Ernesto to let him know I was on the way to the airport. Tom had sent a message saying visitation had been arranged. I sent a message back thanking him. Ernesto met me just as I finished going through customs. We gathered my luggage and headed out to his car. Where to first? He asked as we settled in. I need to see Senor Montoya first. He nodded his head and pulled out. When we got to the government building where his office was located, Ernesto parked the car. I'll wait for you here, Senor Rick, he said. I nodded my head and went inside. I managed to find Montoya's office and was stopped by a receptionist. Can I help you, senor? She asked in accented English. Yes, por favor. I'd like to see Senor Montoya. I have some information on a case he's working on, I said. You have information for me, senor? I heard a man ask from behind me. I turned to see a very well-dressed man standing in a door. Are you Senor Montoya? He nodded his head. Yes, I am. And who might you be? Rick Weston, I replied, extending a hand. I understand you're handling the case against my wife, Marcy. He shook my hand and nodded his head. Weston, yes, of course. Please come in. He ushered me into his office and closed the door. So, what is the nature of this information you have for me? I pulled the thumb drive out of my pocket and handed it to him. On that drive, you will find video of her and Trey Cardosa talking about moving product, which I believe refers to the drug she was caught with, I said. There are other videos as well. You'll also find some email exchanges. I've provided a text file that shows the URL of her web email client, along with her credentials. Perhaps there's something in those emails you may find useful. He regarded me warily for a few moments before speaking. You do realize, Senor Weston, that it's my job to put her in jail for a very long time? Yes, I know, I said. So, please explain. Why are you providing me with this evidence? Shouldn't you be helping her defense lawyer? He asked. When I didn't answer right away, he smiled and nodded his head. Ah, your wife was having an affair with Dr. Cardosa, wasn't she? He asked. I nodded my head. Yes, she was. I see, he said with a slight smile. And you see this prosecution as a way to get some revenge? No? I can understand that. I might be tempted to do the same, or worse, if I learned my wife was screwing someone behind my back. But I will not stand by and let my office be used as a vehicle for your revenge, no matter how much it may be deserved. Senor Montoya, I understand how you might come to that conclusion. Yes, I'd like nothing more than to get my pound of flesh, but I intend to serve her with divorce papers. That's why I came to Bogota. I'm also a retired Army intelligence officer, and I will not turn a blind eye to someone breaking the law, not even my own soon-to-be ex-wife. On top of that, I work for a global company with an office here in Bogota, and I would be derelict in my duty if I did not present you with what I know. Use the information or not. That's your choice, Senor Montoya, I said. He nodded his head when I finished. All right, Senor Weston, I'll take a look at your evidence. How long do you plan to be in Bogota? A day or two, tops, I said. I'm serving my wife papers tomorrow, and hopefully I can convince her to sign them. Then I'll be heading back to the States. Where are you staying? He asked me. I've been invited to stay with a colleague of mine who works in our office here. I don't have his address right off the top of my head, but I'll be more than happy to give you my cell phone number. No need, Senor Weston. I'll see you before you leave. And welcome to Bogota. I nodded my head and accepted his extended hand. Thank you, Senor Montoya, I said as I left. So, how did it go? Ernesto asked when I got back to his car. You're right, I said. Montoya is a tough son of a bitch. He laughed. You have no idea. Come on, let's get to my place. Lupe has been working on dinner most of the day. We got to his house, and he set me up in a small spare bedroom for the night after introducing me to his wife, Lupe, and his children. We sat down to dinner, and after Ernesto said grace, Lupe brought the food out. I didn't recognize the dish she set in front of us all, and looked at Ernesto. It's called bandeja paisa, he said. I've eaten this my whole life. Enjoy. I didn't know where to start, so I just dug in. The plate contained meat, a fried egg, rice, beans, an avocado half, chorizo, and something called a plantain. I had never heard of it before, but I found it to be quite delicious. I was stuffed when I finished the plate. That was delicious, Lupe, I said when I finished. She smiled and thanked me for the compliment. When we finished, Ernesto and I sat outside with a cigar and a glass of aguardiente, or fiery water. It was quite sweet, but it had quite a kick, and I definitely understood why it was called fiery water, as it burned all the way down my throat. We talked for a while about this or that, nothing too serious. Eventually, it got dark, so we headed inside and went to bed. After breakfast the next day, Ernesto drove me to the prison where Marcy was being held. I couldn't believe the condition of the place. It was noisy, crowded, and smelly. I met a man from the embassy, and together, we went inside, where we were ushered into a small room. Marcy was already there, and she looked awful. Her face was gaunt, her eyes red with dark circles under them. I could tell she had lost some weight. I also saw that she was shackled to the table. She looked up at me with sadness in her eyes. I sat down across from her and opened my briefcase. I pulled out the packet and set it on the table. You once gave me a choice, Marcy, I began. Either take you back or walk away. I think you know what choice I made. She looked down, tears falling down her face. I'm sorry, Rick, she stammered. I never meant to hurt you. Bullshit, I said quietly. You plotted with Leslie for weeks before you came down here. You plotted this even longer than that. I know that you went to see Allison Hargraves. I also know what you intended to do when you came back to the States. You probably know by now that I found the cameras you had put into the house. I know you intended to set me and Leslie up for a fall, all the while pretending to be her friend and my so-called loving wife. You know, I loved you with all my heart for a quarter of a century. I did my best. I admit, I wasn't perfect, and yes, I slipped once in Iraq. But that was in the heat of the moment. We were damn near killed out there. I swear to God I never once plotted to cheat on you or hurt you the way you hurt me. I also found the email where you admitted to Trey that you cheated on me that year I was in Korea. Remember that big fight we had? The whole time you swore you never cheated. But that was a lie, wasn't it? And you've done nothing but lie to me ever since. During our last phone call, you said, just once, if I don't mind. Well, guess what, Marcy? I do mind. That last day, the day you were caught. Do you even remember what that day was? No, what was it? She asked quietly. It was our 25th wedding anniversary, I said. You couldn't even be bothered to remember that, could you? Tears continued falling down her face as I spoke. I wanted to say more, to cause her more hurt and suffering, but I decided to cut to the chase. I came down here for one reason, Marcy, pulling out the divorce papers. You need to sign these so we can end this sham of a marriage. But I don't want a divorce, she said. More bullshit. You had Allison cook up a set of divorce papers and were going to give me a choice. Either be your willing, enslaved cuck or be ruined in a divorce. Face it, Marcy, we're done. I'm done with you. You're going to be here for a very long time, but I won't be waiting for you back home. Sign the papers, I added, pulling out a pen. Just so you know, I've already sent most of your money down here for your expenses and fees. It'll take a bit for it to get to you, but it's on its way. You can keep your 401k, your car, your clothes, and your personal stuff. Your parents already have that stuff. The rest is mine. So, sign the papers and it'll be a done deal in about 60 days, I said. Have you told the kids about this? She inquired. Yes, I told them, I said. It broke their hearts to hear what you've turned into. I gave them an address where they can write you. I don't know if they will or not. She picked up the pen. All right, she said quietly. You win. Where do I sign? I pointed out the places where Lisa indicated on the papers. She read as she signed, then I signed, and the man from the embassy signed as a witness to our signatures. When we were finished, I put the papers back in the envelope. By the way, I noticed you've already paid for your reservation at the Ambassador Hotel in full. I really hate to see that reservation go to waste, so I'd like to take advantage of it. Go ahead, she said. I obviously won't be needing it. Thank you. And just so you know, I plan to invite Deidre to join me. I thought we could finish what we started in Iraq. Just the one time. If you don't mind, that is. She looked at me with fire in her eyes. I shook my head. After what you've done, what you've been doing, don't even go there, I said. As far as I'm concerned, we're no longer married. Enjoy the rest of your miserable life. I got up and walked out as she sat at the table, sobbing. When we got outside, I saw Montoya standing by his car. He came over and shook the embassy man's hand and looked at me. If you don't mind, I'd like to speak with Colonel Weston in private for a few minutes, he said. The man from the embassy nodded his head and said goodbye before getting into his car. Montoya put an arm around me. Walk with me for a moment, Colonel, he said. I haven't been a colonel for some time, Senor Montoya. Please, call me Rick. He smiled and nodded his head. And you may call me Ricardo. Once a military officer, always a military officer. Yes? He asked rhetorically. Ernesto thinks very highly of you. He's told me a lot of good things about you. You know Ernesto? I asked. Indeed I do, Rick, he said with a smile. We served in the army together for quite some time. Then he went to work for your Acme Global and I became a prosecuting attorney. You know, I went through your evidence, and you were right. It's quite compelling. It will certainly save my government a great deal of time, effort, and money. That's one of the reasons I decided not to charge you for criminal conspiracy, he said. I looked at him shocked. Oh, don't be so surprised, he added. Ernesto told me what you had planned. As you may have thought, if your wife was caught with a small amount for personal use, She would have probably been a guest of ours for a couple days, then fined and deported. Fortunately for you, however, nothing illegal was purchased, and the money you sent ended up going to a charity for widows and orphans. The nuns said they are very appreciative of your gift, by the way, he said with a smile. It was their account Ernesto gave you. I couldn't help but smile. Between your stellar record and your voluntary cooperation, I decided not to charge you, he said. However, I have to inform you that if you ever think of doing anything like that again, I'll have no choice but to take action. I hope you understand. I do, Ricardo, I said. Thank you. No, Rick, thank you. The information you gave us will be quite useful. I know you wanted justice after what your wife and Dr. Cardosa did, but trust me, justice is coming. I understand you're on your way back to the airport? Yes, I'm going back to the States now, I said. Well, Rick, if you ever make it back to Bogota, perhaps you'll stay long enough to be my guest for dinner, he said. I'd like that very much, Ricardo. He stopped and extended a hand.
Vaya con Dios, Rick, said.
I shook his hand and nodded my head.
Vaya con Dios, Ricardo, said.
And thank you for everything. We parted ways and I walked back to Ernesto's car. Everything okay? He asked. Yes, Ernesto, everything is fine, I said. But I'd better bet to the airport so I don't miss my flight. We got in his car and drove to the airport. When we got there, he turned to me. Boss, I'm sorry I didn't follow your orders. I couldn't do what you wanted. If you like, I'll turn in my resignation. Don't apologize, Ernesto. You didn't do anything wrong. In fact, you were the only one who did the right thing. It's me who should apologize for putting you in that position in the first place. And perhaps it's me who should resign. No, boss, don't do that, he said. I understand how you feel, what you were feeling. Hell, if it were me, I probably would have curb-stomped her but and fed her to the fish. It all worked out in the end. Yes, it did, I said. Well, thank you for everything, Ernesto. I'll be in touch. And give my best to Lupe and the kids. Do you think you might be back someday? He asked. Of course. Where else would I find a helping of bandeja paisa anyway? He laughed as we shook hands. I'll be in touch, Ernesto. Take care of yourself, and thank you for all your help. Deidre met me at the Ambassador Hotel on the day I was supposed to have met Marcy. Yes, we finished what we started in Iraq, and it was a memorable night. We laid in bed, wrapped in each other's arms. You know, I put in my retirement papers, she said. I've been thinking of a career change. Oh, I asked, what would you like to do? I was thinking about becoming a full-time wife and homemaker, she said. Really? Yes. Do you think there might be an opening coming up sometime soon? I rolled over and looked at her pretty face. You know, I think there just might be one coming up in a couple weeks or so. Would you like to apply for the position? I asked jokingly. I thought I just did, she said with a laugh. Indeed you did. And you know I've fallen in love with you, she said. And I've fallen in love with you, I told her. If it weren't for you, I don't know what I would have done. So, shall we make it official then? She asked. Even though your divorce isn't officially final yet? Why not? That is, if you don't mind. Of course not, babe, she said. Will you marry me and make me the happiest man on earth? I asked. She smiled and kissed me deeply. Yes, Rick Weston, I'll marry you. I love you so much. Marcy and Trey stood trial in Colombia for drug trafficking and were both found guilty. Both of them got the maximum sentence, 12 years, along with a very hefty fine. Trey was sent to one of the worst prisons in the country, a crowded, rat-infested hole that already held more than 200% of its designed capacity. He didn't last very long, maybe a couple years. It turned out that members of a rival cartel took umbrage at his efforts to encroach on their territory. His mutilated body was found one morning before breakfast and hastily buried. Marcy ended up getting sent to Buen Pastor, Bogota's best-known women's prison. She fared somewhat better than Trey, but life was still very hard on her. She doesn't get many visitors, naturally, but someone from the embassy comes by periodically to check up on her and make sure she's doing okay. The kids send letters and cards at least once a month, and they tell me she looks forward to the day when they can be reunited. Penny and the others were finally released from their house arrest after the trial and allowed to come home. A visibly pregnant Penny and her doctor friend were met at the airport by a process server and were raked over the coals in their divorces. Both of them were fired from the hospital and had to leave the area to find work elsewhere. I lost touch with Leslie and Vince, but the last time I heard, they were still involved in their lifestyle. Leslie, however, had to take a break after she got pregnant. They still don't know who the father is. I sold the house and bought a new one after Deidre and I got married. She's transitioning quite nicely into her chosen career path. I've told her many times there's always a place for her at Acme, but she says she's tired of all that spook stuff and wants to spend the rest of her time making a happy home for the two of us and her cat. That is, if I don't mind, which I don't. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.